Hey everybody, and welcome to week 2 of the Disciplinary Literacy course. This is going to be the first mini lecture. I won't record one every week, but every now and then, if Dana and I think that the material could be enriched by a little mini lecture, then I'll go ahead and have one of these short videos for you. For this week, I wanted to touch base on the essential question for the week, which is how do teachers' beliefs influence their instruction? And not knowing how long it may have been for some of you since you've thought about those different theoretical perspectives and how those came about, I figured I'd give you a little bit of a background lecture just to sort of prime your thinking as you read this week's required and optional readings and consider how your belief and how your stance towards learning might influence the way that you view the issue of content area literacy versus disciplinary literacy, genre understandings, and how all that could play a role. So first, what do we mean by theoretical beliefs when we're asking that question? Because there's a dichotomy between epistemological beliefs and theoretical beliefs, slightly different, though very closely related. I'm not going to touch on ontological beliefs because the lines between ontological belief and epistemological belief is even narrower, and just doesn't seem worth mentioning. So for me, I think it's important to start with your epistemological belief. So when we're talking about epistemology, it's sort of how you know what you know. So for example, the difference between a positivist and a constructionist, as you'll see here on the screen, is that a constructivist would think that what you know and the person knowing it are sort of inseparable, whereas a positive would say that they're completely independent. Now, how that translates into the real world, so to speak, is that a positivist epistemologically would believe that the world is fixed and discoverable, and so it doesn't matter who it is describing a certain thing, they're going to describe it the same way because that thing exists in a finite way that can only be understood from one perspective, whereas a constructivist would challenge that belief. Now, when you view the world that way, that can really play a big role in how you interpret the different possibilities within disciplines, and not just there, but within most of your instructional choices. Well, let me move on before I get too far ahead of myself. For the most part, when we're talking about epistemological belief, we're running along a spectrum between objectivity and subjectivity. Constructionism is sort of in the middle there. And the question that you need to answer is, what do you believe truth is? What do you believe reality is? How do you know that about it? Now, an objectivist is going to say that there is a singular discoverable reality that exists independent from anyone existing within it. This is in the classic question of, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? An objectivist would say yes, because objectively trees exist, objectively they make a sound when they fall, and it doesn't matter if there's anyone there to hear it. I know there's more to that discussion, but it's just one way to think about it. Now, a subjectivist would have a contrary opinion and would say, with no one there to interpret reality, then there is no reality. Reality only exists because we give it description and meaning based on a lot of different factors. There's a lot of different ways to be a subjectivist. Constructionist is ish in the middle, the idea that there is an interpretation occurring, but that interpretation is of an objective reality, so that there is an objective reality. There's just no possible way to perfectly describe it, because as human beings, we're always constructing our understanding of that objective reality, and so we're going to bring our own understandings and meanings into that. So what we mean by theoretical perspectives, and in this case, the theoretical belief systems that we're sort of trying to touch on, grow out of your epistemological understandings. So, for example, positivism, single discoverable truth. That's very objectivist. And where that becomes important is because objectivists and positivists see measuring and accurately, so however that can be interpreted. I'm sorry, I should also put my own beliefs out there. I am not a positivist. There's nothing wrong with that particular perspective. It's just not the one I ascribe to myself. So measuring and accurately describing the world is the goal. It's the end goal of understanding knowledge for positivists. Constructivists, on the other hand, would say that there isn't a single truth, that we create reality, that we understand the world as individuals and also as members of groups, and that we interpret the meaning of the events, activities, experiences that we have all around us, and that is our goal as we gain knowledge and understanding, is to be able to make those interpretations and explicate them. Pragmatism is the idea that reality is constantly interpreted, so kind of on the same side as the constructivists, but that the usefulness of the interpretation has to have primacy. It has to be applicable to some sort of real world issue. And a pragmatist is going to focus on solving problems. I don't think it's surprising that a lot of educational research sort of stems from that particular branch of theoretical belief, because teachers in the classrooms tend to only, care is the wrong word, but the focus is certainly on how much can this help me to enhance student learning, which is a real world issue. And if understanding something in a certain way doesn't help with that issue, it's not productive and not interested in it. So again, we're moving along that spectrum from objective to subjective. Subjectivism is straight subjectivism, is that reality is what we perceive it to be, and that nothing exists without a perceiver, and that all that you know, you don't really know it. It's not something that can be tangibly known and agreed upon because it is all perspective. And if you subscribe to that side of things, then most likely your goal is to interpret how people make sense of the world. Since there is no objective existence, there isn't really any concern about describing that objective existence. Instead, the focus is on understanding and describing how people create their understanding and create their interpretations and make sense of the world. One last one, and it's all the way out on the end, and this is how I see it most of the time in books, even though it's not like on the other side. I would say that positivism to subjectivism in the little thing that I have on the screen is kind of a part of that spectrum. Critical is not like somehow all the way over on the other end of subjectivism, because really you can be a critical constructivist scholar, you can be a critical pragmatist, you can be a critical subjectivist. The issue here isn't necessarily, I don't think you can be a critical positivist. I think that's the one that might not work as well, but perhaps it can be, and I'm just not able to picture it in my own head. But critical theoretical perspective means not only is reality constructed, and particularly socially constructed, but it's shaped by the people who have power within that social structure. So that when there are differences in understandings, there's probably a large part of power coming to play. Who's in control of information, who's in control of what counts and what is constructed as being viable knowledge. Another goal typically is it's not just an acknowledgement that that power structure exists and that it influences us. It extends even farther than that and says we need to change that. We need to actively be working to reduce the influence of those power structures throughout our society. So that would be a critical theory perspective. That's really all I have for you guys. If you have any questions, please let Dana and I know. If you're struggling to wrap your brain around some of these things, if you have any texts from any research courses you took, it might be good to flip back to the theoretical perspective side. Merriam and Tisdale is one that I know is quite good. If you want to really get deep into it, you can look at Crotty's Foundations of Social Research. There's certainly a deep philosophical look at how these things influence us and how we do research, which I think then can also extend into how we do our work in the classroom. But if you guys need any more suggestions or are interested in exploring that more, just let us know. Hopefully this was helpful if it was not. Also, please let me know that, and we'll adjust the idea of having these mini lectures. And have a great week and enjoy the readings.